There's no point in having really good research and data if you can't package it in a way that it is presentable and accessible to your reader, even if that reader is an expert in your field. It is your supervisor's responsibility not only to give you feedback on the content of your work, but also to help you grow as a writer. So they also need to give you feedback on your punctuation, your grammar, your spelling, and also how you package your ideas, for instance. But people are people and they can only do so many things at a time. So whether you are submitting your thesis for examination, whether you're just sending it to your supervisor for some feedback, or whether you're giving it to a fellow student to have a read, it'll be easier for them to give you feedback on the stuff that matters if your document is well prepared. In this video, I'm going to give you a few strategies on how and why you should self-edit your work. If you're new here, my name is Odile Mackett and I'm a lecturer. On my page, you'll find a host of resources to help you become a more effective postgraduate student and or academic. You can also sign up for my newsletter at odilemackett.com. If you're a returning visitor, welcome back. So let me first start with a few reasons why it is good to self-edit your own work. As the author of your work, you remain ultimately responsible. So you may have people who help you along the way, like your supervisors or peer reviewers, but when someone asks who wrote this, you're the one who's going to put up your hand. When you take this type of ownership, you'll definitely work to produce the best possible document every single time. And if you do this, you're likely to get faster feedback, whether you're submitting it to your supervisor or whether you're submitting it for examination. In addition to this, you allow the reader to make a better assessment of the arguments you're trying to put forward without leaving them to sift through to grammatical and spelling errors. During the examination process, if you are writing a thesis or a dissertation, the technical quality of your work is also assessed. So if you have really good data and findings, having a good presentation could become the difference between a pass and a distinction. Lastly, if you are self-editing, this also allows you to revise your document as you go. This will save you time at the end before submission, where you wouldn't need to spend days fixing all the errors that you left in your document. So when you're self-editing, what this basically means is that you are rereading and revising what you had written. You are not, for instance, writing the first draft of your document and then sending it on to someone for feedback. In order to be as effective as you can be at self-editing, it is good to use your most productive time of the day to do it. So your brain really needs to be very fresh in order for you to spot mistakes and possible errors in your document. So you don't want to do this after a long day when you are mentally fatigued or after you've had an intense writing session, for instance. If you've had a writing session, then leave the writing session behind you and move on to editing on another day. Another useful thing to do is to divide the manuscript into sections. And by this I mean, don't edit the entire manuscript in one go. Why? Because your brain needs to be fresh when you are editing. If you're going to try and go through the entire document in one go, you're going to miss mistakes. So if you know that you want to, for instance, submit your document to your supervisor in 5 days' time, then split the manuscript into 5 sections and just read the first section. If you have more time, leave the next section for the next day's session so that your brain can be fresh again. It is also important to not be afraid to remove irrelevant sections. So many students leave sections in their report that really make no sense at all because they've written it really well. One thing that you can do to avoid sort of deleting parts that you're scared of letting go is to create a separate document. So what I will usually have when I start self-editing is I will have 2 documents. One will be the actual manuscript and one will be a document that includes sections that I have removed from the manuscript. So I never delete anything. This way you get to have a manuscript that is coherent, but you still keep all the good parts in another document in case you want to, say for instance, convert your research report to a journal article where some of those bits might then be able to come back in the document. It is also good to build up an editing checklist, and I have an example of an editing checklist on my website. I'll leave a link in the description below. An editing checklist will basically be things that you need to check every time before you submit your document. So if you think about your document being submitted multiple times, not just once for examination, but multiple times to your supervisor or to other people who you want to read your document, it'll be good to have this editing checklist and to check that you've checked everything on that list before you actually click send. So an example of something that might be included on an editing checklist is, for instance, checking the table of contents, refreshing it to make sure that headings that I've moved around actually reflect the correct new page number. Very important point is also to read from a hard copy. I know that we read all our documents on devices these days, from our emails to our messages to our Word documents. It helps to have a printed out copy. For some reason, I don't know why, things look different when they are printed out. So when I am ready to submit a journal article, for instance, I will print out the final version of that article, and I'm always surprised at how many mistakes I find on the printed copy that I missed. So reading from a hard copy helps you to make comments or corrections on that hard copy, which you can then transfer to the soft copy on your computer. Read your work aloud. This is also a really good thing to do. This way you can hear what it sounds like. Sometimes when you read something in your head, it doesn't sound the same as when you read it out loud. Reading it out loud also helps you to hear what it might sound like to another person, and you may then choose to rephrase things. Ask someone else to read your work aloud. So it is useful if you have a younger brother or sister who you can tie to a chair. Don't tie anyone to a chair. But it is useful if you have someone who can read your work back to you. And this is also useful if you have a writing partner. So if you have another student who's in your cohort, or someone who's also doing their degree, you can then swap work and ask them to read your document. Reading it aloud helps you to hear what it sounds like. So if there's anything that needs to change, you can then pick up on that. Related to this is asking someone else to just read your work. So giving them the copy and sending them away with it and asking them for comments. This is a really good exercise to volunteer for as well, because when you see how someone else writes, you sort of get a sense of what are the things that might be missing in your own writing. Read back to front, very important. So what often happens, especially with proposals, for instance, is that you will start reading the document, the introduction will be really good, and as you get deeper and deeper into the document, the worse it gets. That's because people always edit from the start to the end. It helps to sometimes read back to front. And by this, I don't mean read the last word of the sentence incoherently, but I mean section your document, like I said earlier. So for instance, start on the last section of the conclusion and then move on to a paragraph that's somewhere in your methodology. This will also help you to have a fresh mind every time you start editing. And apply that fresh mind to different parts of the document, so not just to the introduction. Another useful thing is to add words to your dictionary. So if you are using Microsoft Word and there is a spelling error that Word picks up, what you can do is you can right click on that word and then say add to dictionary. What this will do is that Word will no longer pick that up as a word which is misspelled, but rather it will be a word that is now part of the dictionary. So my name, for instance, Odile Mackett, I've added my name and my surname to the dictionary so that Word doesn't underline my name and my surname. The reason why it's important to do this is because it is very easy to see when someone hasn't done so much as a simple spell check on their Word document. That just shows that you're being sloppy. If you are writing in not an American or European context, so like South Africa, for instance, and you're writing in English and you are writing words like Johannesburg or Putadichaba or Shoshanguve, Microsoft Word will pick those up as spelling errors. And so what that will then end up doing is it'll give you a very messy document with words that are underlined all over the place. And if you leave those lines in place, it'll be difficult to distinguish between words that actually need to be corrected as spelling errors and words that Microsoft Word just don't know. So if you add those words to your dictionary, you will then have a cleaner document and it'll be easier to pick up if word is actually underlining a word that does actually need attention. Related to the last point is to make sure that you are set to the right language in Microsoft Word. So in our context, in my context in South Africa, we use South African English or we use UK English on our computers. Sometimes the computers come with American English as the default. What that then does is it'll underline words or autocorrect words that shouldn't be auto-corrected. So analyze or prioritize, which the Americans spell with the Z, but is actually spelled with an S in UK or South African English. So if you are not working in the right language on your document, then Word is going to autocorrect those words and it will then be wrong in your final document. So also make sure that you are working in the correct language. The second last point is using a grammar revision journal. So a grammar revision journal is especially useful for non-native English speakers such as myself, where you can pick up errors that you are constantly making, or where you can actually write down rules of the language. And we all know English has a lot of rules. So something like when to use has and when to use have, or when to use definite and indefinite articles and when to use them and when not to use them. It's easy to pick up for me as a supervisor when a student makes those what I call second language errors, where they make the same mistake consistently because perhaps that is not how the words are used in their native language. But once you sort of have the rule written down, the English language rule written down, it'll be easier to identify when you have in fact made that mistake in your own document. Okay, and then the very last thing is to use editing tools. So there are a lot of online tools that can help you improve your writing. So apart from Microsoft Word spell checker, which really gives you a very basic spell check, there are other tools that can give you more advanced feedback on the phrasing of your sentences, like Grammarly, for instance. Grammarly also has a blog post where they provide a few more tools that you can use. I'm going to post that in the description below. I hope this was useful and that you will have a fantastic time self-editing your work, not just sending it along like you used to. But if you like this video and you'd like to see more of this, remember to like this video and subscribe to my channel and give me your thoughts in the comments below.